Jesus, in the gospel, when he's teaching, very often uses these agrarian figures of, trees bearing fruit, of keeping our hand to the plow, of the sower and the seed. And today our Lord speaks here of the grain of wheat that falls to the ground and dies. If it does not do so, it remains only a grain of wheat, but if it dies, it produces much fruit. Wheat in the ancient world in Israel was the source of a staple, the bread that they baked to live, to have sustenance. We talk about our daily bread. That would have been very significant when our Lord taught the Our Father to the apostles, referring to daily bread would have been very meaningful. Still cultures, Italy, people still go in the morning to get fresh bread to eat during the day. You see lines out in front of the bakeries because it's a fundamental part of their diet, and they want it fresh. And so having daily bread was a very meaningful thing to those who heard firsthand our Lord's words. It also, of course, has a spiritual meaning, allegorical meaning, which our Lord intended, meaning the Eucharist. There is a grain of wheat that must die in order to become bread, and the grain of wheat, in fact, does die in order to become unleavened bread for the holy sacrifice, the Mass. But this figure of the grain of wheat dying also points to the sacrifice of Jesus. Jesus suffers and dies on the cross in order that we might have life through him, in order that we might have the Eucharist even. The presence of Jesus in the Eucharist comes by way of the mystical reenactment of our Lord's suffering, death, and resurrection on the altar, his sacrifice on the cross. And this is a mystery into which we are supposed to incorporate ourselves. Our Lord says, "Whoever serves me must follow me, and where I am, there also will my servant be." Right? Where I am, the place and where I am, also will my servant be. And so we put ourselves in the place of our Lord. We put ourselves at Bethlehem to meditate upon the wonderful, inestimable gift of his presence on earth, his incarnation, and also his presence in the Eucharist. Bethlehem means house of bread. We also follow our Lord in his public ministry and in his generosity, his charity, his works of mercy. And ultimately this leads us to the foot of the cross, where we're called to be where he is, most of all, and to live the mystery of his undying love for us, his suffering, dying, and resurrected love for us. So today we celebrate the feast of St. Lawrence, deacon and martyr, one of the great saints of the Roman Church, not just the Western Church in general, but specifically of the city of Rome. He was chosen by Pope Sixtus II to be the archdeacon, the principal deacon of his cathedral church at the Lateran in Rome. And he was chosen partly because of his eloquence, and partly because of his evident holiness. So he was the Pope's preacher, and he also was assigned, as deacons are supposed to be assigned, to the care of the poor, the sick, and all those who were in need. And after Pope Sixtus II was martyred, the prefect of Rome came to Lawrence and demanded that Lawrence, who also was the treasurer of the church in Rome, demanded that he turn over the treasures of the church to the emperor. The church had taken upon itself many of the sort of signs and treasures that would be assigned to the emperor. They used this in the liturgy in honor and veneration of Jesus, who is the King of Kings. And the emperor, who claimed sole right to that position, wanted the treasures of the church. And so Deacon Lawrence, St. Lawrence, promised the prefect that he would deliver these things to him. And so he asked for several days in order to gather everything. And then when it was time, he brought before the prefect not the physical treasures of the church, not gold and silver and gems and that sort of thing, or money. He brought before the prefect the poor, the sick, the lame, the destitute, the lepers, all those who were in need of the temporal care of the church, which the Deacon Lawrence had been providing. And he came before the emperor and said, "These are the true treasures of the church, because these are those who have been created in the image and likeness of God, and they have found themselves in circumstances which make them like the poor and the suffering Christ. And it is the honor, the privilege, and the duty of the church to care for those who are in need, both because they are persons who deserve to have the basic human necessities of life, like every person has that right, and also because in a particular way they are the poorest of the poor, who are, as Mother Teresa would say, the distressing disguise of Christ. Christ is present in them in a particular way. And this ultimately, of course, led to the martyrdom of St. Lawrence. The prefect was not amused by Lawrence's little joke, which was not really a joke, but the absolute truth in reality. And famously, St. Lawrence was burned alive, cooked basically on a gridiron. And it's said that around him, as he was suffering and dying, there was an envelope of flame that for a time kept him unhurt, and that people could smell what they thought was fresh bread being baked. And so in this miracle, we also have a sign of what our Lord's talking about in the gospel, that if the grain of wheat dies, it will bear much fruit. It will become the staple of the life of the Christian. It will become the seed ground of holiness for the church, and it will become a sign of our Lord's promise that he will not leave us orphans. He becomes for us our daily bread. He becomes food for us on a daily basis so that we might have life. And so we should think about the charity of St. Lawrence as an extension in this world of the charity of Christ. Where the Lord is, there his disciple will be. And we should also be present in the life of the church for those who are Christ's presence for us, namely the poor, the destitute, the sick, the suffering, those who suffer at the hands of others, those who suffer from racism, from prejudice, from neglect, all those in this world who are in need, and also those who have a spiritual poverty. They too deserve our love and care. We should not have the spirit of antagonism and anger towards those who are different from us, even spiritually different from us, but rather we should be prepared, like Christ and St. Lawrence, to endure all things for the love of those who need our charity. And that should become our daily witness to those in the world, especially in these difficult times. We are called to be a source of peace, generosity, and charity for those who need that witness, and that's really everybody. And so we should put aside our lower inclinations and have them raised up through the power of Christ, who gives us himself in the Eucharist.